What about the nature of her injuries? Has there been any discussion or research or investigation regarding um, whether or not her injuries are consistent with someone who was hit
Yeah.
by a train?
It's interesting. You and I have discussed that, and I have two books that you're probably familiar with. It's Medical Legal Investigation by Switzer, right? And they really don't talk about that too much. And in going on the internet over the years, and I was checking my file, there's there's not a abundance of definitive articles as to what a body will look like after been hit by the train. Now,
And the reason I say that is because in reviewing the autopsy, it makes note of and again, I will apologize to my listeners, and this is
yeah,
difficult for many people to hear, but I think it's important to explain. Um, they were cuts. They were cut.
yeah.
And so does that also add to your concern that this was not a suicide?
Right. Now, the cuts on the body that are noted in a diagram that was made by the state medical examiner's office makes this case even more problematic. And I want to explain why. The student engineer gives three different versions, one of which is in a report. And I'll find it as I'm going through the file here as we're talking. And he's quoted as saying by one of the detectives that a certain person jumped out of the woods 13 feet onto the tracks. That's one of the versions. The version on the night in question, we didn't see anything until we were right on top of her and she comes onto the tracks. The third version comes from when he's interviewed under oath, and we have the transcript of that, and he talks about seeing something a half a mile away and then a quarter of a mile away. When I took you to the intersection of the tracks, on the western side of Chilton Road and the bridge that goes over the tracks, the student engineer would not have been able to see anything because of the concrete abutments supporting the bridge. So for him to say, as
there's an overpass.
Yeah,
right.
There's an overpass. And thank you. I complicated it. Okay. So here's what is so interesting in his sworn statement.
And this sworn statement, just for the record, was taken on July 22nd of 2015. So about 10 days after the incident, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. So he says in part, I'm going to quote this. And initially, I at that distance, it was approximately maybe like a half a mile to a quarter mile away. It was pretty far away. I couldn't discern what it was specifically. Then he says, as I come closer, approximately a quarter mile away, or a little closer than that, I notice the position in dark. He says, I noticed a human being in a crouched position in dark clothing. Now, this is totally contrary to what he said on the night in question, and then when and as contained in the report of one of the detectives about seeing someone jump 13 feet.
We also says she has dark shorts on, and she didn't have dark shorts. Right.
So here you have a student engineer, and I suspect this was his first time having an encounter like this.
And hopefully his last.
Yeah. And so therefore he is sufficiently traumatized by the event.
Well, we could talk a lot about witness recollection and how things can be skewed when there's a traumatic event. I mean, there are studies done on that.
Yeah.
I also want to point out, while I'm thinking of it, is there was the black box, so to speak, we call it the black box, for the train was downloaded. And I did look at that. Was there anything in that download that was of significance? I mean, I noted just very quickly that it looks like the horn was blown, and then 4 seconds later the brake was applied. Was that an accurate review?
That was accurate, but as Louise Hausman said, the student engineer said that he rang the bell, and there was no evidence that had been done.
Is there a bell different from a horn?
Yeah, I thought there was.
Okay.
Yeah,
I didn't know that, and I don't know if that would have been documented in the black box.
I thought there was some indication that the student engineer said that he did something, and I believe the engineer backed them up, but there was no record of it in the black box.
Okay. I had read an article recently that raised that question, and I wasn't sure if that would have been reflected in the black box download. The black box download does seem to suggest that the horn was blown, but again, I don't know if there's a separate bell or whatever that would have been listed.